Alright, what's up guys, and welcome back to another Yu-Gi-Oh video. So today's video is going to be, I guess, kind of a history-focused video. I'm just talking about some of the very first cards printed in the TCG. And the two cards we're going to focus on are these two. So it's this trap hole on the left and this monster board on the right. Now you guys can see right away they look pretty crazy. They're kind of like, they have square corners, they have square stamps, they have way off center, miscut kind of styles, and this one's got two stamps instead of one. And for starter deck Yugi commons, there's a lot of stuff like this. So the uncut sheets of SDY, there's a few of the regular uncut sheets out there, and then you find other uncut sheets with like all of this crazy stuff going on, like the wrong stamps, too many stamps. There are some which have too many Eye of Anubises as well, like rather than the different shape stamp. And just a lot of stuff like that, as well as obviously sample cards, which I'm not going to be covering in this video, but it's another thing which is kind of exclusive to SDY. And so the reason for that, as far as we can tell at least, is that starter deck Yugi commons were the first cards, or at least the first glossy print cards that were printed in the TCG. So the uncut sheets which I've seen are dated to Jan 2002, which is earlier than like the LOB hollow sheets we have and stuff like that. So probably they were just setting the printers up and using the SDY commons as a kind of scapegoat, or however you want to think about it, just like a guinea pig to test out different things which they could do with cards. And the two cards we have here are actually kind of quite different to one another if we're talking about the history behind them and why they exist. So the one on the right, this Monster Reborn, is actually a non-factory cut card. So the idea is that this was printed in the factory as it appears to you now, but it was never actually cut up. It just was left as a whole uncut sheet and never touched and never intended for distribution. And the reason it has the square stamps is hard to say exactly, but that's the shape of the stamp which Upper Deck used for other trading card games already when they took on the Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG. So they would make sports cards and things like that, which would have this same shape. But this does actually have the Eye of Anubis. You can get a good shot of it there. So this was not actually stamped with the same stamp that sports cards had. They obviously took the reel for the Eye of Anubis and then just fed it into the stamping machines that they already had set up. So I don't really think this would be right to call this a misprint, because I don't think it's by accident that there are two stamps kind of in the middle of nowhere on the card. This simply happened because they're trying to set stuff up. They're trying to see, how to apply the Eye of Anubis to the card and stuff like that. And another thing which kind of shows that that's maybe the history of the card and why it exists is if you check out the surface, the card stock is like the same or very, very similar, I would say, to a glossy print card. But if you actually look at this surface quality, hopefully this shows on camera, it has a lot less surface gloss than an actual glossy print card. So here's just a regular first edition Summon Skull from Starter Deck Yugi glossy print. And you should hopefully be able to see that this has a really thick layer of gloss on the surface, whereas the Monster Reborn is more or less matte. It doesn't have the same kind of glossy look at all. So that means probably they were trying to save on costs because they just didn't get the printing machine, which prints the rest of the card, to print that same level of gloss onto it. Again, it just implies they never intended to release this stuff in the first place. This probably was never supposed to leave the factory, and it's just as a result of some workers who wanted to take something home to, show their friends or whatever, kind of smuggling the sheets out. So yeah, that's the first card to look at. Just gives some interesting insight into the earliest history of the game. I wouldn't exactly call it a test print because, I mean, it's essentially just a normal Monster Reborn. The reason it has square corners is just because it's been hand cut by someone at a later date, with a guillotine or something like that. And the reason for the stamps, is probably because they were trying to test out the Eye of Anubis and just see how it would actually work, applying the role of Anubis stickers to the card. Now the other card we have, this to me is actually a much more interesting card, although you could almost say it's less significant historically, because this isn't a test print or anything like that, in my opinion. So the reason this card looks so crazy, if I bring back the Summon Skull, you'll be able to see that it's actually a bigger size than a Yu-Gi-Oh card as well, is because it was mixed up in the factory after being printed. So this would have been printed as a completely normal sheet of SDY, and then after that it was mixed up with other sheets in the factory, with other card games, more specifically that Upper Deck was making. So after being printed, this would have been then treated afterwards as a Bionicle, the Borak Awake TCG card. This was a McDonald's Mighty Kids Meal promotion. I think it came out June 2002. So a very similar time to the SDY release date, maybe a couple of months afterwards. And you guys can see the shape of the card, the size of the card, and also the position of the stamp, as well as the contents of the stamp. So this is not an Eye of Anubis. It's a Upper Deck generic logo that they would use for sports cards and stuff. Is like identical between the two cards. Obviously the backs look completely different. But the main thing I wanted to ascertain when I picked this card up was whether this was actually a factory cut card, or whether it's just like the Monster Reborn we've already looked at, where it's kind of a essentially something that's been cut out of a sheet many years after leaving the factory, just for the sake of being able to sell it for more than you can sell the whole sheet for. And in this case, it would make a big difference to the value, in my opinion, because if it's non-factory cut, then it's not actually a miscut at all. Like the fact that it shows 4 different cards would just be because someone looking to make money cut the card out of the sheet in such a way that it looks crazy. But having looked at the card, I would say it does actually check out that it's kind of legit. So the main things that you kind of look at, I guess this is a separate part of the video now, just sort of discussing how to tell if something is factory cut or not. Obviously the fact that it's square corners, normally that would be important, but in this case the actual Bionicle card has square corners as well, so that doesn't necessarily tell you anything. What you want to look out for is sort of signs that they were cut by the same machine. Because if cards are cut by the same machine at the same time, they will, generally speaking, have similar styles of cut and things like that. So if you look at the Bionicle card, you guys should hopefully be able to see it has very raised edges on all 4 edges, and also a lot of chipping, which is just from the factory. It's sort of cut in such a way that the edge gets a bit of a lip to it, and that often means that some of the edge comes off as well. And the SDY common, obviously the cardstock is different. This is just the regular cardstock of an SDY common, but it has that same very lifted cut on all 4 sides on the back. Pretty much identical to the Bionicle card, and it also has the same chipping. So from the back I would say it checks out, and then the front as well. It's not necessarily as easy to tell, but the Bionicle card does have some very minor chipping on the front bottom edge and left edge, and then the top edge and right edge are clean. And the SDY common has the same stuff, so the left edge has chipping, if you look very closely. Same with the bottom. And then the right edge and the top edge are pretty much cleanly cut. So looking at it, like everything as a whole, it's not difficult for me to say that's a legit factory cut card. And so unlike the Monster Reborn we looked at, this actually would have left the factory as an already cut card in early 2002. And I assume would have been pulled from one of the booster packs which had the Bionicle cards in. I don't believe there's any video evidence of one of these coming out of a Bionicle pack. But there are stories online, people saying they pulled them, and so overall, to me, it checks out as a legit error. And I guess we can just bring back the Monster Reborn one more time to kind of demonstrate the difference I was talking about on the back. You guys can see the Monster Reborn has just like completely flat edges for the most part. So honestly, that implies it was cut with a sharper instrument, like actually in a way with a higher quality cutter than the other cards we're looking at were. But it also means that it wasn't cut with the same cutter, because it doesn't have those same characteristics that we were looking at. So yeah, I mean, I just wanted to make this video more or less to kind of give a bit of insight into these cards, especially with how they are pretty much the earliest cards in the TCG. The last comparison just to bring out is obviously I showed you guys how the Monster Reborn does not have that level of surface gloss you expect from a glossy print card. This Miscut, on the other hand, it's hard to say exactly if it's the same level of gloss or if it's a bit more or a bit less. But I would definitely say this has, you know, a significant level of surface gloss applied to it, which wasn't true of the other one. So again, it's just something that implies that the card did get printed as expected for a card that would actually be released, and it just got mixed up after that. So that's pretty much everything we have for today, guys. I just thought, having picked up those two kind of misprint cards, it would be kind of fun to make a video about it, talk about some of these earliest oddities that you get in the TCG. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hope you found it interesting. And with that being said, this is Schlost, signing out.